In this episode, you'll hear some sensitive topics. So, with this trigger warning, if you have little ones around, please grab your headphones now.
I asked him, "Is this how you want me to help you?" And very faintly in the back of inside my head, I heard a very quiet yes. And I thought, did I really hear that? Or am I making it up? Because a lot of times when we go down this road of flexing these intuitive muscles, starting to learn about them, we always get second guess ourselves. Well, did I really get that? Did I just make that up? Was that my imagination? And there were selfish reasons behind it, honestly, because I wanted both. I wanted both. I wanted to go down that path and I wanted Toby to heal. And I thought, maybe I can do it out of sheer will. But if I don't try, if I don't go down that path, he's going to die. So he's probably going to die anyway. But here is a path that I can go down that might alter that, knowing that, like that deep, deep, deep part of ourselves, knowing this probably wasn't going to happen, but I still had hope because I think that's one of the things that drives us too is hope, that we have hope.
Folks, this week's guest is my new friend, Karen Hixson, animal communicator, shamanic practitioner, and teacher. From a deep love of animals at a young age, what was Karen's life experiences that led her awakening of her spiritual gifts in communicating with animals? You'll definitely want to tune in to hear Karen's extraordinary story. Let's cue the intro. Welcome to the Boom Vision Podcast, the show that empowers you to live an enriching life physically, mentally, and spiritually. I am your host, Benjamin Ye, and I created this podcast to give you perspectives on how to strengthen your mindset so that you can build optimal health, create aligned wealth, and connect with your higher self. It's all interconnected. Let's get to work. Hi, folks. Welcome back to episode 89 of the Boom Vision Podcast. I'm delighted to share today's interview with my new friend, Karen Hixson. I was connected to Karen through my wife, Ruby. When she was sharing how she knew this wonderful person in her energy healing class, as my wife was describing Karen's gifts, I felt this pull that I should invite her on my show. Sure enough, after having our first video call to get to know each other, I knew I had to extend this invitation for Karen to join us on Boom Vision. As a brief background, Karen Hixson is a certified animal communicator, shamanic practitioner, shamanic teacher, energy healing practitioner, and evidential medium. She uses her animal communication and shamanic skills to reveal and deepen the bonds between humans, their animals, and the spirit world. Karen works with the compassionate spirits to bring healing for the animal and the human. She helps people discover the soul level lesson that their animal, whether they're living or in spirit, is here to teach their human. She also guides clients to a deeper meaning behind difficult animals and challenging situations. Her specialty is helping people feel and understand the incredible love and compassion animals and spirits have for those in physical form. So without further ado, here's Karen. Karen Hixson, welcome to the Boom Vision Podcast. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Ben. It's lovely to be here.
Fantastic. So Karen, I love to dive right in. Can you start with your origin story? Can you tell a little bit about where it all started for you and what's led to the path that you are on today?
Yes, thank you, Ben. That's a great question. So I've always been drawn to animals. Even when I was little, I would love to talk to the birds or even the little insects that would crawl across the sidewalk. And I had a deep love for animals that continued through my life. And as I got older and I started to be able to have animals on my own when I was living on my own, I ended up with animals that were physically challenged with health issues. When I would take them to the vet, the tests would always come back inconclusive. And so it really started way back when with one of my dogs named Bear, and he was a rescue puppy, and he ended up having grand mal seizures, and he would have them every 3 hours, but it would take him about 3 hours to come out of a seizure, and so he was seizing all the time. So the vets were able to put him on medications that would stop that. But after a while, I could just see how his body was being affected by those medications. Plus, he started to have some other physical health challenges, and those the vet did not know what was wrong. And I can't tell you how I ended up finding this person, but it led me to homeopathy. So I started to take him to an animal homeopathist, and she, through this homeopathy, was able to get him off of his seizure medications. And he never had another seizure again. I thought, wow, that's amazing. And she was able to help him with some of his other health challenges. And then his body started to, he had some problems walking, and somehow or another, I ended up finding someone who did animal acupuncture. Now, keep in mind, this is back in the 90s when this is not mainstream. And so I would have to meet her in a parking lot of a vet's office because they wouldn't do it inside the vet's office. And before an acupuncture session, he would have great difficulty getting in the car. But after, he could jump into the car and he was just a completely different animal. So I thought, wow, this is great. So eventually he did pass, and then we got another dog, and that dog also had some health challenges. So that led me to learn about flower essences, or to discover that, and herbal remedies and things like that. So, and then he eventually passed, and then we got our last dog, our most recent one that passed was Toby. And Toby, I had tried all of those modalities with him because he again ended up with health challenges. But when I tried those other modalities of the homeopathy or the flower essences or the acupuncture or Chinese herbs, they didn't work. And I thought, oh no, what am I going to do now? And that led me to, again, to a woman who did energy healing. And then she was able to help him for a bit. But then through her, I learned about shamanic animal communication. But I knew as soon as I started down that road that Toby would die. And it was a really hard choice. I knew this was the path I needed to go down because the animals had been guiding me down this pathway for years, in the baby steps, if you will, because that's probably what I could handle. And now I was at a crossroads again of knowing I needed to step forward onto a new path, that I was going to lose Toby in the process. So I get sorry, I get emotional about it still. But I realized his part of his purpose of coming into my life was to guide me down this path. And I thought, okay, I will do this, but maybe I can have both. Why does it have to be that I have to go down this path and I can't help him? So maybe I can do both. So that was my thinking when I went into it. And about 4 weeks after I started that class, he died.
Hmm.
And it just has led me into this life and this path I never would have gone down had it not been for the animals in my life. And that's why I decided to become a professional or a certified animal communicator and do shamanic work with animals to honor Toby and those animals that came before him with this work. And it's been a very rewarding and soul feeding path. And I'm very grateful to them.
Hmm. Wow, Karen, I'm curious. When you said that before you embarked on this latest chapter of, almost feels like an upgrade because you're learning this new like tool on your utility belt, so to speak. And it seems like a very big upgrade. You said you had this knowing that if you started that chapter, that might be the end of Toby's chapter. Was that your intuition talking to you? Did you like, was it a vision that came into place, or how did you know having that knowing? How did that unfold for you?
Oh, that's a good question because that was at a point when my intuitive gifts, I think I'd always had them. I just didn't recognize that I had them and I was using them. When I would look at Toby, I would just get a knowing. I just knew. And I wanted to be wrong. So it's one of those where you get that feeling and that knowing in your body, but you really want to ignore it because you don't like, or that's just not what you want to have happen or the direction that you want it to go. But that in itself is also a gift to be able to listen to that inner knowing and have the courage to surrender, knowing that I don't know why this is going to happen. I don't understand this process, but in the end, it's going to serve a greater purpose that I do not know in this moment.
Yeah.
And I still work on that
Mm.
to this day.
Karen, first of all, I want to acknowledge you because I'm feeling something here, and it's because having that knowing and having that courage to still step forward is something to be acknowledged and recognized. Because I feel like when some people are met with those crossroads, their default reaction might be, well, why don't we just keep status quo? If it ain't broken, why fix it? And so I'm really curious, and my intention is to do this in a really gentle way. But if you were to go back to that moment, what was it that you felt gave you the courage to guide you in saying, I think in part of my evolution, I do need to take that step. And with that step, there might be someone that leaves this ship, this vessel, right?
Mhm.
Like what was going through your mind, your spiritually, emotionally to give you that encouragement of, no, this is the right step because there's times where people do not want to go to that side.
Well, it was extremely difficult. It was an extremely difficult decision. It felt selfish on one level, but when I would look at him and I asked him, and this is before I even started learning animal communication,
Oh, wow.
I asked him, "Is this how you want me to help you?" And very faintly in the back of inside my head, I heard a very quiet yes. And I thought, did I really hear that? Or am I making it up? Because a lot of times when we go down this road of flexing these intuitive muscles, starting to learn about them, we always get second guess ourselves. Well, did I really get that? Did I just make that up? Was that my imagination? And there were selfish reasons behind it, honestly, because I wanted both. I wanted both. I wanted to go down that path and I wanted
Mm.
Toby to heal. And I thought, maybe I can do it out of sheer will. But if I don't try, if I don't go down that path, he's going to die. So he's probably going to die anyway. But here is a path that I can go down that might alter that. Knowing that, like that deep, deep, deep part of ourselves, knowing this probably wasn't going to happen, but I still had hope because I think that's one of the things that drives us too is hope, that we have hope. But as I began the course, it was really interesting because I learned a lot with Toby because he was still there for 4 weeks. And he was teaching me how to let go, but letting me know that, okay, he's letting go with his physical body, but he's still going to be there. He's not letting go of that spiritual connection that I have with him. And he was working with me to negotiate this new relationship that we were going to have. With once he crossed over, our relationship was going to shift and it was going to be different. And that's one of the hardest things when we lose an animal or a person is that physical form isn't there anymore. And how do you navigate that? How do you work that in the relationship now? Um, it's a beautiful relationship too. It's that, okay, I can't pet him, I can't hug him, I can't physically take him for a walk, but yet I know he's there. He's with me. I can feel him on the walk. Sometimes I can see him or I'll hear his bark. He's still letting me know that he's there guiding and supporting. It is hard. It is hard to let go. It is hard to let go of what feels, it's like your favorite pair of slippers. They're so comfortable and you know exactly how they're going to feel and how they're going to fit when you put them on. But uh-oh, now I have holes in the bottom and they're starting to fall apart and it's time to get a new pair of slippers. But I really, really love these old slippers, but they have served their purpose. And now I'm being called to try on these new slippers that's going to walk me in a new direction and down a new path.
Hmm. So, Karen, in listening to your story, there's two things that I see that comes up for me. One of them, which is that I find it very fascinating that of all the different animals that you've adopted and raised, there's a consistent through line of they come with a medical condition. So part of me feels like, oh, that's interesting because perhaps you were in that energetic state where, okay, these are the people you're attracting to that you can really help nurture and heal.
Mm.
The second part of it, because it blows my mind to hear that for someone to be open to
Mhm.
homeopathy, acupuncture in the 90s, right? We're not talking about in the last 10 years, right? My question for you on that second point is growing up when you were young, were you always open-minded to spirituality at a young age, or what was it that you felt allowed you to be open to explore these different types of modalities?
So when I was little, I would hear spirits. They were my friends. I would talk to them. We would have conversations, and I enjoyed their company. I could see them in my room. And it isn't that I would tell anyone about that, but it was second nature. I mean, it was just so natural to talk to these beings and to the animals. And well, what ended up happening is one day I was playing hide and seek with my friends, and the spirits were wanting to have conversation, and I was hiding, and I said, I can't talk. I'm hiding. I don't want to give away my spot. You have to be quiet. You have to go away. And they, of course, respectfully, they did. They didn't go away, but they did become quiet. And then it just, as you age, you know, things you develop and you change and kind of become conditioned, I suppose, to the norms of your environment. But actually, this was in the early 2000s. I actually became extremely ill, and the doctors didn't know what was wrong with me. I mean, they had an idea of what had started this whole health episode, but the doctors didn't know what to do with me anymore. And I thought, okay, I'm in a health crisis, and the doctors that I'm turning to can't help me. What do I do? And I ended up finding alternative care. It was the alternative modalities. One was muscle testing, and to find out, because I was having reactions to the foods that I was eating. So I was really I was not really able to consume any food because I was having all these reactions.
Mm,
And so through the muscle testing and then through Chinese herbs and acupuncture, it brought me back to health.
mm,
And interesting is that I'd had animals that had medical conditions that the doctors couldn't help. And then I ended up having medical conditions the doctor didn't end up, they were having a hard time helping me with. And then that cycle continued, I think, just until I arrived where I needed to arrive. And had all of that not happened, I wouldn't be where I am today. And it's really hard to see that when you're in the moment of why is this happening? Or, I have these experiences. Why or what does that mean? It isn't until later, sometimes decades and decades later, to realize, oh, that's why all of that happened. Now I can see the gifts. Now I can see the lessons that were there. But I couldn't see it then, but I can see it
mm.
now.
So, Karen, as I'm connecting the dots here, so one observation is back to the first point earlier that you had this consistency of finding animals that needed help. When I couple that with you having the innate gift of being able to communicate with spirits, and it tells me something. It tells me that this is very likely not your first rodeo. And so I'm curious, Karen. My intuition is telling me you've probably done this for many lifetimes before. This is probably not your first time. Do you feel the same way? And can you share how you feel about that?
That is, well, I think anyone who is here on Earth, because it is a very challenging environment, is probably not their first rodeo. I think where we are in that journey is different, perhaps. Do I feel? Yes, I suppose there are times when I feel I have been here before and I have faced challenges. And I can certainly feel that energetically too. But in a way, it also feels brand new
Hmm.
because I've come into this lifetime or into this body to experience it as me in this lifetime. And what does that feel like? And what does that entail? And yes, maybe the past can inform me and influence me, which I do think it does. And I do think my future self also influences me, but I'm still uniquely me. It's just, oh, this is the physical form that I'm going to experience this in. I'm trying to think how I know that.
Hmm. Well, it could just be because your sense is when you already have that knowing, lands on people in very different ways, right? Some people have visions, some people will hear it, and some people just already just know. They don't really need to even see it to already know. And it seems to me, again, seeing this recurring pattern for you is that you have that knowing,
Mhm.
and it's just whether do you trust it? Do you follow it?
Right. Well, I'm going to give you an example
Hmm.
of, I still am working on that process of following that inner guidance and following that knowing. My husband and I were walking our dog one evening, and it was a little later at night, and we were walking through the neighborhood. We live near a green belt, and the neighborhood is kind of built around the green belt. So we were kind of sticking to the neighborhood, and we were going to follow the path that stayed in the neighborhood with the street lights. And then we were going to pass the green belt. And then I was wanting to continue on through the neighborhood and have this kind of longer meandering walk. And as we start through the neighborhood, somebody's smoke alarm is going off. I thought, oh, I've been there. I know what that's like when your smoke alarm's going off and you're having to deal with that. So my husband and I continue to walk, and we're approaching an intersection where there's a man walking his dog. It's a golden retriever off leash. Well, our dog does not care for the golden retriever breed. So we knew that this was going to potentially be a situation. So I thought, okay. So I told my husband, let's just turn around and we head back towards where we had come from. And I still hear the smoke alarm. So I told my husband, I think why don't we just walk down there? Or walk down that greenbelt path, because off of that path was this little area where there's some duplexes. And I thought, I think let's just go walk down there. Smoke detector still going off. I think, why don't we just go walk and see what that's about? So right away, my mental mind, my intuitive mind, they're both trying to have space. They're both wanting attention. My left brain is thinking, okay, there's a smoke alarm going off. It's now been going off for about 15 to 20 minutes. That doesn't seem right. My intuitive brain or feeling is something is very wrong here. We need to go find out what this is.
Mm.
So so they're a duplex and we're walking towards the sound, but I'm having to choose which one is it that has a smoke alarm. So my left brain is looking at it like, okay, is it this one or is it this one? My intuition is saying it's that one. I thought, oh, okay. So I walk up to it and I thought, and my left brain is like, how, maybe somebody needs help because, or their smoke detectors just going wonky or whatever. But they had a side light next to their door. And my intuitive feeling is there's a fire and the lights are on. And my left brain is like, but there's nobody home. My intuition is saying, no, there is a man who is in there who's not conscious. And I'm like, what? Then my left brain is like, well, how can you even know that? That doesn't even make sense. And I'm ringing the doorbell and nobody's coming. Left brain is thinking, well, gosh, the smoke alarm is going off. I'm ringing the doorbell, knocking. Clearly nobody's home. A dog comes to the door. So I thought, okay, no, there is a dog here. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm seeing smoke. My left brain is like, is that smoke? Or is it just the window cloudy? So I told my husband, I'm calling 911 because this is not right. So the sheriff's officer comes and he's pounding on the door and he ends up having to kick in the door. And this whole time I'm thinking there's someone in there, but my left brain is thinking, no, it isn't. How can they not hear the smoke alarm going off? Or my ringing the doorbell, the sheriff's officer knocking and kicking in the door. How is that possible? So we wait, and yes, the officer confirmed that there was smoke. So we're sitting there waiting, and I know there's a dog in there. And I'm worried about the dog because there's a lot of activity, is going to be scared. And I was afraid, okay, it may bolt.
Mm.
So I wanted to stay there just in case the dog bolted so that maybe we could help.
Was the dog barking, by the way, during this whole time, or it was just being
No,
quiet? Oh,
it was very quiet.
huh.
And when I was watching it through the window, I could tell it was waiting. And it was waiting for something, but I didn't quite know what that was. But again, it's my left brain is fighting to be heard and my intuition is fighting to be heard. I have this knowing, and it's all coming to a head in this moment. And so the fire department comes and they go in, and well, the dog does bolt. And I thought, oh dear. So I go and I follow her, and I thought, there's a busy road. I don't want her to run into traffic. And so I'm trying to call her, like the normal things that I would do. And then suddenly I think, well, hello, you're an animal communicator. Could you just talk to her? Right, of course. However, when I went to ask her permission to speak with her, her energy was all over the place
Hmm.
because she was in a survival mode.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, that part is not going to work. So now I need to use this other part of calling in compassionate spirits who can see the situation better than I can, who can help her and help manage this situation to keep her safe and help whatever else is going on in the house. But I'm also receiving this intuition that she wants to run. She
Hmm.
really wants to run, but she's not because she's tied to a human, the human that's in the home.
Hmm.
Well, there was a man inside who was unconscious.
Hmm.
There was a fire in the kitchen. And I didn't know any of that until I was with her and I'm getting that information that she's not leaving because of this person that she does not want to leave
Hmm.
because she's feeling very tied to them. And I thought, okay. So she ended up coming and laying next to me. She wouldn't, with a little bit of distance, but she would not allow any of the officers or anyone else to come near us. So I thought, okay, if I can keep her with me, then I know that she'll be safe. But she's waiting for that person. And I told the officers if there's any way that that person is physically able to come and get her, she will go with him. And that's what she's waiting for. Fortunately, the police and the fire department were able to get the person conscious and walking and was able to get the harness. He was able to come over and get the harness on her so that she
Hmm.
would bolt. So after making sure that he didn't need more help with the dog, we left and at that point, I was like, well, my shamanic side comes in. I thought, okay, well, this was a really traumatic event for her, and she's probably going to need to have some kind of a soul retrieval, but I don't have permission. And so I'm just going to wish them well. So 2 days later, I'm in my meditative prayers, and she comes and she asks for healing. So I did that for her. And maybe 3 days later, I happened to walk outside and there she is walking with her human. And she turned to look at me across the street. And if you can imagine a dog smiling, she
Hmm.
smiled and she had her tail up and she looked so happy. And I felt that the circle was complete. But going back to the knowing, I got all of these knowings, but my left brain is thinking, no, that doesn't make sense. This is not adding up to this situation, but my intuition is saying something completely different. And
Yeah.
it's that fight in us of which one do we listen to? Because our left brain absolutely has a purpose. It does help us
Yeah.
to be safe. But there's this other side too.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. How long ago was this incident?
Oh, it wasn't that long ago, maybe 2 or 3 weeks.
Wow. Okay. Okay, so two questions that comes into mind. One is, did that gentleman realize you probably just saved his life? And then two is, I'm curious how your husband was reacting as this whole ordeal was unfolding. Like the person that was unconscious, I mean, did he realize like you're the one that called 911? No. Okay.
I don't think so. I don't think
Mm,
so.
okay.
Yeah, he
But the
was
dog
just,
knows.
yeah. I think so.
Does your husband, how did he react? And I have to
Mm,
imagine he understands this gift that you have and just going with the
mhm.
flow, right?
Right. Well, of course, I'm not talking of this out loud to him. I'm
Yeah.
just telling, it's one of those where because when I was walking up to the door, he said, "Are you going to ring the doorbell?"
Yeah.
Yes, I'm going to ring the doorbell. But he was right there with me the whole time. He said, "Okay, I'm going to run with our dog Scarlet. I'm gonna because I didn't know what street we were even on.
Yeah.
So he runs with her to get the name of the street so he can
Yeah.
tell me when I call 911
Right. Right.
and he runs home to get another leash and dog treats for this
Oh,
dog to try and help. And so he was standing there as support,
yeah.
available for whatever
Yeah.
was needed. And it wasn't until afterwards that even I realized everything that had been going on within me.
Yeah.
Because when you're in a situation like that, you have so much coming at you. You just do
Mm-hmm.
or think. And it
Mm-hmm.
isn't until after you think, oh, right. oh, that's how that was working. And now I can see this. And
Mm.
so, but yes, my husband, I'm very fortunate, has been very supportive. When we first met, I was not doing this work at all. And it hadn't fully, Toby was really what had it fully open up for
Yeah.
me. And we had been together, we'd been married for quite some time before we got Toby. And I mean, he's an engineer. And so he's very,
Left brain.
left-brained.
Yeah.
And it's funny because he's watched this evolution in me and
Yeah.
seeing these little changes. And it's been a beautiful process because it's allowed him to also adjust
Mm.
and see this new path and this new way of life that I've started to do.
Wow. Karen, I'm so happy you follow your intuition in that particular incident. I have not gone through a ordeal like yours. That's a pretty amazing story. I mean, almost on a daily basis, there's situations where there's a choice between going left or going right, metaphorically. And more likely than not, what my logic brain wants to say versus where my intuition wants to go are different directions. And I got to this point in my life now where I'm able to faintly distinguish the tone and signal from my intuition that's different than when my either ego or mind is talking. And what's funny is, Mel Robbins has this book called the 5 second rule, right? Where it's like a countdown from five, four, three, two, one, and you just do it. You don't want to overthink it because otherwise your mind will take over. And more likely than not, depending on your programming, you might be more Debbie Downer than it is, right? Being your best cheerleader. And so for me, I had to shorten that to 1 second. If I count down from five, my mind will find some way to either outthink it or outvoice it, whatever it may be. But for me, it's like when my intuition, if I'm feeling something without allowing enough time for my mind to process, it's like one, go. That's, I just have to trust it without
Mhm.
knowing. And I started with like little things first, right? But then it's just, man, how many times have my intuition has been right, but I didn't listen? And I'm trying to reduce those occurrences by, for me, applying that 1 second rule. You just have to go with it with full faith and to see how that unfolds for you. And you learn from that because everyone's going to have their own nuances. And I'm just so happy for you that you've like got these like two voices, but the intuition saying, no, it's very clear. And
Mhm.
I don't know, just wanted to share that because I think that's my own journey too. And when I have those two voices in my head, so to speak, and which one to listen to.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay, so Karen, animal communicator, can you explain a little bit for someone that has never heard of that term before? What does it mean to be an animal communicator? And do you work with either live animals, either ones that have crossed over? Like, what does that entail?
So it is animal communication is connecting in with the animal to get things from their perspective and to see what they have to share. So they will share about their personality and they can share about their human from their perspective. They also can share the soul level lesson that they are here to teach you. Animal communicators can talk to animals that are living or that have crossed over because that spirit of them, that essence is still there. And it is also a way to deepen that bond and that relationship between the human and the animal, and to also help the animal with whatever situation or challenge that they may be going through. And it's to bring it's like having a conversation with a person and getting their side of things and their perception of things. And I receive information from the animal either through visions, through visual, or I can hear something. I can get a knowing, or they can have me feel something in my body that maybe they're experiencing. And sometimes it can also be through taste or smell, but for me, those aren't the predominant ones. that I use when I'm with animals. And, people ask, well, do they have to know, does it have to be in English or in this, it doesn't matter really what language you speak, because the animals are able to communicate and to use your experiences and your language, your strengths, whatever intuitive, clear is your strength. They can use that
Hmm.
to convey the communication and the messages that they're giving.
So I'm curious, Karen, when people reach out to you in booking like a session because they want to communicate with their animals, whether it's alive or crossed over, what have you seen as a reoccurring pattern of in these situations, folks typically reach out to you? Is it also similar to your own personal experience of, okay, they're going through some kind of medical condition and they're not able to find answers through, call it Western medicine or whatever it may be, and they just want to find answers. Is it typically more of that route, or what have you seen as a
Mm.
pattern of folks that typically reach out?
For me, I tend to have a lot of clients who are in deep grief from the loss
Mm,
of an animal. And that is something I think our society is starting to recognize more, that our animals, we do have this deep attachment to them. And when they pass, there is such grief. We can have such grief over their passing. And they come to see, is their animal okay? Did they make the right decisions? Did they suffer? Did they have pain? What is it like where they are now? It's to help them navigate their loss of their animal with someone who can understand and not judge this
mm,
grieving process that they're going through for an animal. I do also have people who will come because their animal does have, maybe they're going to the bathroom outside the litter box, or they've stopped eating, or why aren't they, how do they feel about this other animal in the house? Do they want another animal companion in the home? So I get those types of questions too, but mostly the people that come to me are grieving, in very deep grief. And people can feel like their animal is their soul mate, and that, excuse me, that they're very connected to this animal through their soul. And that would be the equivalent of if you found your soulmate in a person and they crossed over, that kind of attachment and the kind of grief that one would go through in that process of when that happens.
mm,
And society has not always found it acceptable for
mm,
people to be that attached or to view their animals that way or to grieve over their animal that way. But I think what's beautiful is, with people becoming aware of animal communication and this other side to animals, it's becoming more acceptable for that bond and that relationship to be seen.
And so when you're helping your clients in that grieving process, in the situations where, let's say, the animal did cross over, is it essentially a form of mediumship in the sense that you're being a translator and communicator between the spirit and the human? Is that what it is that you're helping to facilitate, or is it more of how does that work?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes. So we are the middleman or the conduit, I suppose, between that connection between the human and the animal. And it's funny because in my animal communications, I started to get people who had crossed over. The animals would bring in the people that they were with
Hmm.
in the spirit world.
Hmm.
And so when that started to happen, I thought, oh yeah, okay, I need to start learning mediumship because people are coming. But yes, it is like that. It's, they come, what they want their human to know is that they are still there,
Hmm.
and they are still loving them and supporting them and guiding them, and they are still helping with their soul lessons even though they've crossed over. It's just in a different way. And I guess the difference between an animal that would be here crossed over is just that physical form. They're not going to necessarily share, although they can, what they're feeling in their body, but they can. I mean, you can go back to what did it feel like when you were a puppy, and they can give that information. It's connecting that spirit to spirit with the animal. And then they can share from their perspective. And then they can also tap into their higher self, if you will,
Hmm.
to give that perspective.
You're saying the animal can connect with their higher self, or you're saying the human?
Right. No, the animal can do
Mm.
that. They're able to look at the human, what they need to learn, what they're going through, and help facilitate all of that for them. There are people who think, well, this is just my pet. What is my pet? This is just my cat, and my cat does crazy wonky things, and how can that be serving a higher purpose? But behind those behaviors, there is something that they are trying to convey to their human,
Mm.
and it's trying to figure out what it is. So going to the animal and asking, why are you doing this? And letting them share what that reason could be. So, for example, I had a client who her animal had gotten lost, and she was trying everything she could to get her animal back. And the animal was saying, one, this wasn't your fault that I got out, because she had been feeling guilty that it was her fault that her animal had gotten out. And the animal was saying, no, this is not your fault. I chose to leave because I had to go. I was not going to be able to grow my soul of why I came here had I stayed. This was an opportunity for me as the animal to go and find out or help myself with my soul lesson that I came
Mm.
here to do. And I needed that from you to make that happen. So whether I come home or not, please know I'm okay,
Mm.
that this was my choice, and that I am very grateful to you for all of the opportunities that you have given me. And had the animals stayed, they would not have been able to work on and maybe go towards what they needed to do for their
Mm.
soul evolution. But at the same time, they're helping the human with their soul evolution, because the animal is saying, you can't control this. This is about surrendering and letting go.
Mm.
And you have to surrender and let me go and let go of this situation, because the tighter you hold on and the more control you want, I will not come back.
Wow. That's sometimes that might be like a tough pill to swallow when they hear that. But what comes to me as I'm listening to you is it's similar to, like, for example, hey, you're on a cruise ship and you have all these different excursions and different stops, and we happen to coincide with one of the legs of the trip. But, like, this is where we were together, and now it's like we're on our separate ways and with our own journeys. And but can you A, accept the fact, and B, let go of that, and just honor that it's a beautiful journey.
Mhm.
It's easy to say that in hindsight or when you're not in it, but when you're in it, it's a really tough,
It is.
it can be a very tough transition to
Absolutely.
feel through, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, I did have a client come because her animal had been reincarnating in her life, and she was wanting to know when, because her animal had passed. And so she's wanting to know, okay, so when are you coming back? And what are you going to look like? And when I went to the animal, I mean, and they come from a great place of love when they do this, but he was telling her, I'm not going to tell you when I'm coming back, because you have been using me as a crutch. You have been
Mm,
very codependent on me to help you get through your life. And it is now time for you to take your power back. And if I
mm,
come back to you, that will disempower you, and I will not be serving you. in that role. And because if I tell you I'm coming back in 6 months or a year, you're going to wait for me and you're not going to do that inner work
Hmm.
that is needed to be done. And I'm not going to tell you what I would, if you do that work, I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to look like because you need to trust yourself. You will know when it is me. You need to trust that. He said, and he was saying, I will help you from the other side with this. I will be watching over you and I will be protecting you, but I cannot come back until you have done your work, which is really hard. That is hard to
Hmm.
hear, but that there's such beauty in that too.
Yeah.
The animal is, acting as this guide for this person and knowing that I know this is what you want, but that's not going to serve you if I give that to you. But I'm going to help you in this other way.
Hmm. Oh my goodness. Okay, so Karen, I want to switch gears a little bit because you mentioned something earlier that I feel can be helpful to clarify, which is that when you're the conduit and communicating between animal, spirit, and human, what's the difference between that and shamanism? Because it feels like shamanism is almost like an elevated healing, if I'm not mistaken. But I'm curious, from how would you explain that to someone that is unfamiliar with those terms, for them to have a understanding of knowing, oh, that's a possibility. Okay.
So when I practice my shamanic work, it is to be hollow bones. And hollow bones means again, it's like being that conduit where you allow the compassionate ones, those who are fully compassionate, because when you work with those fully compassionate spirits, their power can only be used for healing
Hmm.
and for good. And they need a shamanic practitioner in order to have that power come through, that healing for the human or for the animal. And so you become that conduit or those hollow bones for them to work through. So the healing never comes from person, the shamanic practitioner. It's just coming through from the spirits because they know what to do. And with animal communication, it's the same where you just allow for that animal's information or whatever they're wanting to share to flow through you to give to the human. And at first, and even still sometimes, it's hard not to put an interpretation on that and just to deliver what you're seeing, what you're hearing, what you're feeling, the knowing, the tasting or the smelling, just to communicate that
Hmm.
without putting our personal interpretation on it. And that's the same with mediumship too. It's just delivering that raw data to
Hmm.
the human so that the human can then think, oh, okay, well, I know what that means, or oh yeah, that makes sense. And sometimes it doesn't make sense, and it won't until a year later. You just never know. So it's just to allow for that process to flow through,
Hmm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, so I guess my takeaway from what you just shared is that being a communicator is almost, for a lack of a better term, it's like being telephone, right? If I'm away from when there's messages and when it wants to go either way, that you help translate that information, that energy to be able to be
Mhm.
communicated. Versus what I'm hearing from you from shamanism is that you're allowing this spirit energy to allow that healing, and you're just like the vessel in some senses and allowing that. And people that would actually seek for this type of help is when there's some either physical or emotional healing that needs to be done with
Mhm.
a live animal. Is that correct?
Yeah, and it can be an animal that has crossed over. What ends up happening
Hmm.
is that the spirits will also give a healing for the human. So everyone who's involved, the spirits, even myself, they will heal.
Hmm.
Even though you may not be, or maybe you're not aware of all of it, they are
Yeah.
there taking
Hmm.
care of it. and knowing what's for the highest and greatest good
Yeah.
of all of the people in the situation. So I did have, there was a client who came with their animal because their animal was being quite aggressive and had bitten some people and
Mm.
it just had some issues. And so when I connected with the animal, what he was saying is, hey, I have boundaries and you're bringing people into my space, into the safe space where I am, and you're allowing them to cross that boundary, and then I don't feel safe. And so I react. So I will bite. And he was saying to the humans that you also have loose boundaries. You let people in that maybe you shouldn't. And then there are
Mm.
these situations that occur. And so I am helping to teach you about boundaries.
Mm.
But within that, there was also a healing that needed to be done for him because of the dog's ancestral line.
Mm.
So he was adopted from a place that had been there had been a lot of trauma in the land. And his, if you call it almost like an umbilical cord that was tied to the land, was not feeding him well anymore.
Mm.
And it was also because his ancestral line was also tied to this place, and it was through his father's line. And so the spirits were able to move that connection to a time and a place, almost to like his origination point, to start to feed him the nurturing and that energy that would feed his soul and his body again. But also along the way, it's healing that ancestral line through the father's side that needed it. And so it was going back in time, if you will, to that origination point of wherever that happened, healing forward and then to him so that he could, in physical form, have that healing come forward so he could be in a different space and place in physical form. So there was a lot going on there. There's the soul level lessons happening, and then there's also this healing, the ancestral healing, and
Yeah.
there that goes on.
Karen, I'm curious, when you have these sessions and you're helping to relay this message to your client, have they come back to you and saying, man, this transformation has happened because of that healing? Like, did they give you those data points? And are you able to share one just to kind of give a glimpse of what possibilities can be for people?
Oh, yes. Gosh. So one, this is a different client who also had an animal that was being quite aggressive. And through the animal communication and then through the shamanic piece, they did say that he got so much better. And there are many clients actually who have said that their animal has gotten so much better that they do see that transformation. And sometimes after a session, you can see it right away. Sometimes it takes a little bit for that integration
Hmm.
to happen.
Hmm.
There's, gosh, to pick one. The interesting thing is because the information and the healings flow through me, they don't come from me. I don't retain memory.
Mm. Got it.
I
I
only
get that.
yeah, because I'll get an email
Yeah.
or they'll let me know, or if we meet again, if we have another session, they'll say, "Oh
Yeah.
my goodness, this part has really, really shifted for them, and now we have this piece. Can we work on
Mm.
this piece?" We can do that. I did have an animal who had made tremendous progress, but in his communication, he kept saying that because he was an aggressive dog as well, and he was saying, the choice is mine if I want to get better and
Mm.
if I want this to change or not. This
Mm.
is my choice. I'm going to have free will over this. And so he got better and better, and he was doing really well. But then when he made the choice that he was finished with
Mm.
his physical life here,
Mm.
and he did it in a way where the people knew, okay, he's ready to cross over. This is not the place for him. So then when they came back to me to have the animal communication with him, I could feel he was having me feel in his body what was occurring for him. And it was he had such chaos in his head, and there was a lot of pain in his head, and he
Yeah.
was just ready to let go. And
Mm,
even though he had made this progress, he knew, and he kept having me feel, I don't want to be in this body anymore,
mm.
to move on. And so that's what he ended up doing. But that gave great comfort to the people
Yeah.
because it was, oh, okay, yes, he was ready to
Yeah.
move on. And we did do the right thing for him. And he was very grateful for that, says he wasn't trapped in this body that he didn't want to be in anymore.
So Karen, can you share about the different services that you provide for your clients? It sounds like there's readings and sessions, or is there any teachings? Can you tell me a little bit about how it is that you currently serve your clients?
So I do animal communication, which is the and it is soul level animal communication. And then I also do shamanic work with animal communication. So if something comes up in an animal communication session, we can heal the energetics as well behind whatever is going on for that animal. I do also teach shamanic animal communication. So that's coming up in a few months. Everything that I do is on my website. So in my shamanic work, I also it's takes energy healing and that shamanic work that kind of just combines all of that into that session with the animal communication. But you don't have to have an animal communication either. I can work with someone with just shamanism if they have some issues, physical issues or traumas that they're ready to have help with.
Fantastic. And then we'll include your information, your website in the show notes. So that'll be an easy way for people to find you.
Yeah.
So Karen, one question I always ask my guests is that if the DeLorean and time machine was real, where you can travel back in time at any point in your life, my question to you is what point in your life, what age would you travel to speak to your younger self? And what message would you want to share with that younger Karen?
That's a good question. That's hard to say. That's really hard to answer just because when I look at my life, I can see if it's a quilt, I can see all the pieces that have come together to make the quilt. And the
Hmm,
quilt would be very different and would
hmm,
look different had I changed a piece
hmm,
into my quilt. So I guess to my younger self, I would say probably to that little girl to just to let go and surrender and know that there is this bigger plan, this bigger map or the bigger quilt that you can't see but trust
hmm,
that it's there for you and that you are not alone, that you have so much help in the spiritual world, in this invisible realm. You can be in both. You can be in the physical realm and you can be in the spiritual realm, and you can marry those together so they are very harmonious. And it's okay to have both, to keep both.
Beautiful. Wow, I felt that message. So thank you for sharing that, Karen.
So you're welcome.
So my last question to you, Karen, is where can our listeners find you?
So I do have a website, and that's www.karenhixson.com. That's Hixson. You can find
Fantastic. And that's the best way to reach you is through your website.
it is. Yep, that has all my current information. I have an events page that lists what I'm currently up to and where I'm at and what I'm doing.
Fantastic. Karen, thank you so much for coming on our show. I'm very blessed to have my wife Ruby connect us in this way. And as I was meditating for this interview over the weekend, I stumbled upon a quote that I felt like, oh, I think this is going to be meant for this interview. And so I just wanted to share that with you. The quote is, until one has loved an animal, a part of one's soul remains unawakened.
Mm,
Until one has loved an animal, a part of one's soul remains unawakened. And that quote was by Anatole France.
mm,
And it's very clear to me you are very awakened through how so many of the journeys you've gone through. And it's so inspiring and hopeful to know there are people like you to help people in their journeys as they learn to awaken through their relationship with animals too.
mm,
And it's very evident for me that, wow, like all the different animals that you've had in your life is really just that stepping stone, that chapter. And to really encourage and support you to keep moving forward. It isn't to, weigh you down, but rather it's really more meant there to uplift you. And
mm,
so I'm sharing this in the context of if there's one message you can share to the audience members that have an animal, what is one thing you can share in your observation of communicating so much with the animal spirit that you feel can be helpful for people in their journey when they
mm,
are being a animal parent?
mm. Yes. Well, I think part of it is animals, when we're in relationship with animals, it's very different than a relationship with a person because our animals can give us such unconditional love. And it can feel like a very safe and gentle way to learn some of our lessons, to maybe learn about why we came here with their guidance and support. And they do it from a place of such love, such unconditional love for us. And that our animals are our guides and our teachers in so many ways. And trying to think how to describe this.
Mm,
That I think animals call forth in us that desire to be more or to step into ourselves that we know that we came here to be. They invite that
mhm.
and they help us see the beauty that we are, that inner light that we are, and to see ourselves as they see us, as these beautiful, imperfect, divine beings that are here. And they guide and they love us through that.
What a beautiful message. Thank you, Karen. Thank you for being the warm light that you are. Whatever I can do to help you amplify that and as you continue to strengthen and trust your intuition, it's a beautiful thing.
Thank
So
you.
thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Ben. I really appreciate you and the time that you took today and your audience. Thank you.
Folks, I hope you enjoyed today's interview with Karen. If there's one takeaway I can share in today's interview, I'll leave you with this quote. The spiritual connection between humans and animals is a sacred bond that transcends words, a silent language of mutual understanding. This quote was attributed to Unknown. If you enjoyed today's interview, share this episode with someone you feel that also shares the love of animals. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this Boom Vision podcast if you want to thrive together. Until next time, folks, be kind to yourself. Be in the light. Be you. Thank you so much for tuning in to my Boom Vision podcast. If you'd like to find out more about me and this podcast, head over to benjaminyeh.com. That's spelled BenjaminYeh.com. If you haven't already, click subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.